Well, Hen, welcome to one of EPA's Fireside Discussions, and I'm absolutely thrilled, so happy that this is your first speaking gig back in our
Yes, yes.
world for 10 years.
10 years, 10 plus years. Yeah. Yeah. It'll be 10.
Yeah.
Actually, no, you're right, Vic. It's 10 years next. Well, yeah, 10 years. It is 10 years this year, actually, since I've done a speaking gig.
Ah,
I know.
well, you've barely aged in that time.
No, rubbish.
Haven't
Rubbish.
you?
Neither of you. Neither of you. I think it's good.
I'll t- well, I tell you what, being a small business owner during COVID and the cost of living crisis and an economy with zero growth is very aging.
No, I know, Vic, and you've done so well, as you know that when we've had our chats, it's been like, I'm really proud of what you've achieved because it's hard. It's really hard. I mean, I'm glad I didn't have Miss Jones in this time because actually I don't think it would have survived, to be honest.
Do you know?
No, I think it's different. It's difficult, isn't it? It's like that. I mean, guess now being in the charity side of things during COVID, saw a real dip in people contributing and a real dip in giving because people just couldn't afford to do it. So
Mm.
I guess as we know, Miss Jones isn't what it was when I created it. It's very different now. So I think it would be quite interesting if how that still generates income at that point.
Mm.
That would be the only thing for me
Yeah,
during COVID. It would have been interesting to see how that, continued to be. So
yeah, yeah. It was. I mean, it was very, very difficult, and well, for a lot of people for different reasons. I think, well, the cost of living crisis has really whacked people more than COVID because a lot of people were paid furlough to be at home.
yeah.
But the cost of living crisis has just completely knocked people for six, and any savings they had for a rainy day, they're long gone now. When you talk to people, so. Yeah, I
Absolutely.
think it's been scary times on this PA market as well, which we'll talk about. So I think it's good to go back to when you started. Well, why did you become a PA in the first place and who you worked for and
Yeah, gosh, it was so long ago now. It feels like it was ages ago. It's literally probably about 25, 26 years ago that I started. So I started I'll give you a quick summarization of my
mm,
CV. So I trained as a nursery nurse. So I am good for bosses that throw toys out of prams. So basically, I qualified as a nursery nurse from Falkirk College of Tech way back in 1991. Came to London and ended up not doing nursery nursing or being a nanny. I came to London when I was 19 and I was a shop assistant at General Trading Company in Sloane Street. So it was a long time ago. And loved it because you got training on the shop floor and you weren't allowed to be on the shop floor for at least 2 weeks until you'd had your training. So it set you up in good stead and had to speak to customers and everything else like that. So I did that, loved it, then moved to Tiffany's where I became receptionist with the lovely Rosa Monkton, as she was then. And so I worked with one other girl, and so that was the kind of start of my career in there. So I started as a kind of a receptionist there, and then really over time grew into what was then probably a secretarial role more than it was kind of the PA role. It was still 90s, and everyone was still kind of like very much secretary role. So I had different kind of jobs. I moved back to Scotland when I was 21, stayed there till I was 24, and then I was then working as a secretary in what we called SEPA, so it's the Environmental Protection Agency, so the Scottish
okay.
Environmental Protection Agency. Unfortunately, during that time, Dunblane happened, and I had some friends who unfortunately lost their child in Dunblane. So as you can imagine, it was quite a very strange time. Things were very much changing then. And then I decided to come back to London in 2007. And I worked for people like Coca-Cola, which was great. Loved working at Coke. I worked at Michael Page Recruitment. I was a
Hmm.
team PA. That's when the kind of roles changed a bit and you became a team PA.
Hmm.
Where did I go after Michael Page? Oh my goodness, this is so long ago. I'm trying to remember now where I went and what I
Did,
did.
did you go to the
Um,
metros from there or?
yeah, well, I kind of temped actually after Michael Page, I think, if I remember. Sorry, it's post-menopause brain fog. Can't always remember my past, which is probably a good thing. And So I temped quite a bit. I worked for Tay Associates as well. They were brilliant. Susanna Tate, who is now the MD, and I think she's now CEO of Tay, always had my career. So they were the only agency actually that I ever used.
Mm.
And they got me all the great temp jobs, and literally, yeah, Metro was pretty much my last PA role. So I was PA to the managing director of Metro newspaper, and that had started as a temp job. So I went in for, it was either do a temp job for 6 months at Barclays and get a really good pay, or it was 2 weeks at Metro, and that was it. And I never forget Susanna, who was my what do you call them? She was on the temp desk there. No, she was, sorry, Suzanne Tate, she wasn't. It was Joyce at Tay Associates. She was on the temp desk because she went, look, you can interview for the Barclays one for 6 months, but you might not get it. Whereas this is definite work for 2 weeks. And I was like, you know what? I'll just take it. Just as well it did, because it then ended up that I stayed at Metro for 5 years. And absolutely, it was the best job of my career. It really was. It taught me so much. I had a brilliant boss, Steve Auckland, still makes me chuckle to this day. We've got a reunion actually at the end of the month, which is amazing. Yeah, it is actually. It's been, God, I mean, it's 20 years since I worked there, so it's a long time, but it's everyone still keeps in touch. And Steve taught me a lot, actually. He taught me a lot about what falls on the bottom line. He took that newspaper from a loss of 2 million to profit of 10 million in 6 years, which was huge. He really looked after his staff. He still saw, in some ways, admin as admin. That used to really irritate us, actually, because it was like, well, you're just admin. It's like, no, 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 we're a lot more than admin. And mate, your life would not work if you didn't have a daytime wife like me to sort things out. But when I was there, I kind of, Steve realized that I could do a lot more than just being a PA. And while I was there, I climbed Kilimanjaro. I did that for charity, for Endometriosis UK. And I did quite a bit on BBC Breakfast interviewed me as part of Endometriosis UK and why was I doing it, and explaining that I'd had endometriosis for a long time, still do. And so Steve was like, well, if you can do that for this charity, then you can do that for Metro. So I kind of stopped working for him and then kind of went into the PR department with Doug, who was the head of PR. He was brilliant, and again taught me everything I needed to know about PR. He was brilliant. And then, they kind of gave me a challenge to get Metro on every kind of TV news program, so that we could be used as the roundup, at the end of the day of the news, because Metro wasn't actually taken that seriously then, even though we were the third largest circulating newspaper in the UK. People just thought we're a free newspaper, but actually we were non-political, non-judgmental, non-biased, and it was pretty much one of the first kind of newspapers of its kind, really, like that. And then during that time we did London Light as well, so that was the evening paper that came out.
I remember that. Yeah, London Light was great.
Yeah, London Night was brilliant. So they came out before News International got theirs out. So it was tense times, actually. And a lot happened in the years that I worked at Metro. We had the bombings, the 7/7. So that was quite a scary time, because we were contingent, our offices, then we were based out in Surrey Quays. So our offices became contingency if needed. And then we moved to Derry Street, and then we were still seen as like the kind of non-good side of the Daily Mail General Trust. We were seen as the freebie newspaper, but it was brilliant, and it gave me so many different skills in that role that I walked away. Unfortunately, I had to take redundancy, but it was one of the best jobs of my career. I loved it.
But you've also worked for some characters during your career. I call them characters, but I guess there's other words we could use for them as well. How
Very
did
much.
what were your lessons learned from that? Because I think for the vast majority of assistants, if they're in the career for at least a few years, it's almost a certainty that you are going to end up with somebody psychopathic on your roster at some point.
Oh yeah, and I did,
Yeah.
100%. And we talked about this. I mean, I won't use names, but I was put forward for a role as a PA to this person, and I don't know what it is, but as a PA, you think you can change people or you can fix. I think it's something
Yeah.
that we have, it's inherent in us. So I went into this role and I mean, it was hell. I remember people saying to me, you know, are you sure you want to do this role? Like this person's been through PAs, like hot dinners, and I'm like, no, I can do it. I can do this. I can do it. I can do it. And I think in my first couple of days, I remember thinking, oh no, is this going to be okay? And then I think it was that thing of he was very demanding. It was a he. He was incredibly demanding. He used to send messages through on this machine that sat on that sat on your desk. So he would be like, orange juice now. So, you know, he would never actually kind of speak to you, and he was foreign, so you had to listen in to calls that he was having with people to pick up meeting notes. Now, when
Mm.
it's been spoken in a foreign language that you don't understand,
That's
how
a bit
you
hard.
how are you meant to pick up notes? And out of that, if you got something wrong, you would literally be berated.
Mm.
I mean, I watched one of my, so there was me and there was another girl who's the other PA, but she was, which I hated. She was very much, he was like, well, she's under you. You need to train her. And I'm like, no, we work equally. Like, I didn't like
Mm.
that sense of, she's not my assistant. Like, we work together to sort your, like, you know, to sort your office diary out, sort your personal diary out, sort everything out. But I literally got to the point where I was just like, this is horrendous and I
Mm.
can't do it. I really did try, and I tried every way of talking to him and saying, look, we're obviously not gelling, you know, and as a PA, it's important for me to sit down with you and figure out why that is.
Mm.
What are the issues? What do you know, sort of, is there something I'm not doing correctly? Is there something that we can change? And he was just a very difficult guy. And it was like, you know what, life is way too short, and I'm not going to stay in this role.
I genuinely do think now, sort of over 20 years in with my career, I do think there are some people that just don't deserve an EA or PA. I do.
I agree.
And I used to have quite in the past, it was like, well, you know, there's always what's the saying? Somebody's trash is another person's treasure, or the other way around.
Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. There's always a
Yeah.
PA for these people out there somewhere. But actually, you know, there are some people who just have a revolving door
Hmm.
of PAs. I mean, I read about a Hollywood person literally over the weekend that got through 100 PAs in a year and a half.
Oh, that's
So
ridiculous.
you're talking like some of them would have been fired after the first day. I mean,
That's crazy because it's
yeah,
not fair on that individual, you know, because actually you walk away feeling like you failed.
yeah,
And I did with, you know, with that job. It really took me time to build my confidence up again after that. I felt
yeah.
really deflated and I felt like I'd really failed at being
Mm,
a PA and doing my job. I was like, if I can't stick this, then, you know, it was that. But then I think we were in a very different time then. I mean,
mm,
when I look back, I mean, Blackberries had only just come out, and, you know, PAs were relied upon to do the diaries, the emails, the everything else. Whereas, you know, Blackberries came in and the kind of, not the role of the PA changed, but I think bosses changed as to what they
mm.
could do. And from a tiny little thing in their hand, they realized that they could write the emails and they could, you know, add things into their calendar and stuff like that. So, but I felt really, it's funny talking about it because it's something I haven't talked about for a very
Mm.
long time. And when I handed my notice in, I remember the recruitment agency saying to me, don't, like, just give it a few more weeks. And I knew why. Like, I was like, don't treat me as if I'm stupid. I know you're going to lose your fee. Like, I know you're going to lose your fee on this, and it's a 10 grand fee, so of
Mm.
course you're going to be peed off to lose that, but don't put that onto me, please. You know, it was like, I'm making the decision to leave. I mean, I was going to work in tears, and it was just like, why am I doing this to myself? Crazy.
It's yeah, the ultimate gaslighting from recruiters. I mean, in fact, they are masters at it, a lot of them, and
Yeah.
recruiters don't particularly like me. I think they think I attack them too much, but I only say things that I mean and that I've got
Mm.
evidence by, and I don't think EAs and PAs and admins more generally are very well served by the recruitment sector.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sort of less than 5 recruiters nationwide, I would recommend,
Yeah.
you know, to EPA members, and I literally wouldn't touch the rest with a barge pole. But yeah, trying to put their fee over your mental health. Woo.
Yeah, I know. And in those days they would, whereas now we don't have
Yeah,
that. Now
no,
it's totally changed. Totally
yeah.
changed.
So when, so what happened after the Metro? Was that when you set up Miss Jones?
Yes, so I got made redundant from Metro, which was it was tough. Redundancy is never easy. We all know that.
Mm,
It's not an
mm.
easy time. But yes, so Miss Jones was created on the back of a fag packet while I was quite drunk. And literally, that's how I created it. And it was an idea that I came about with because Steve, bless him, from Metro, used to come in and used to put like goodie bags on my desk of things he got at an event the night before, and it's like he's probably taken out some of the really good bits and he's like, "Oh, have a look in there, see if there's anything you want." And it was like, "No, not really. Actually, I don't want your cast off. Bless you. Nice thought, but no thanks."
Mm,
And I suddenly thought there's nothing out there that's giving the PA the rewards or the thank you for booking with us or there was lots for the bosses, but there was nothing for
mm,
PAs to say thanks for booking with us and we really appreciate it. So I was like, I'm sure there's something that we could, put together on a website and start bringing in like, hotels and restaurants and venues and I was thinking for my own career, like, what do I book the most? Well,
mm,
restaurants, always, we know that, like dinners and what else. But then there was things like away days, or there were, days where there was maybe 15 of the board going somewhere and I'd have to book a table, but it was a daily delegate rate of 80 quid. And I'm like, well, I don't want to pay that because they're going to spend more than 80 pounds. Why are you having to do a daily delegate rate? They're going to spend a lot more than 80 pounds. So I kind of started drawing out Miss Jones, and the idea of her actually came from the back of the Daily Mail U magazine. So there was an image of Zelda. I think her name was Zelda. It was a like page that you wrote into if you have problems and stuff like that.
okay, I vaguely remember.
And it was
Yeah.
a female drawing. Plus, I loved Audrey Hepburn, so I was like, right, this. She's going to be classy. Miss Jones is going to be a classy bird. So I was like, this is what she's going to be. So I did actually have, to give this person credit as well, somebody who was very interested in joining with me at the time, and we kind of did initially, and he helped me get the Miss Jones drawings done, which were amazing, and that was the original Miss Jones drawing. And they were absolutely superb. And I've still got them. I found them when I moved. I've still got all the original drawings, which I must
Wow.
frame actually and put them up. Um, and then we set about kind of building the website, and it was very much like, how is this going to work, and who are we going to approach?
Mm,
And I guess working at Metro had given me, and also being a PA, had given me the skills to pick up the phone to anybody. Like, I think this is what a lot of people overlook with PAs is that they're the communicators. It's,
mm,
yes, they're bosses, but they're the ones that are actually communicating on behalf of their boss. So I picked up the phone to Fortnum and Mason, told them what I was doing, picked up the phone to Joan Malone, told them what I was doing, picked up the phone to so many different people. And they were all like, this is brilliant because we want the PAs, we want them
mm.
to come in and use our services. But we don't, we really want to make sure that they're the right PAs that are going to book. And I'm like, well, yeah, absolutely. You don't want just any PA walking in through the door and never using it or kind of just being there and not doing something with it. So started off with three PAs, who I still to this day am eternally grateful for them kind of sitting down and talking with me and figuring out, is this the right thing to do? And then initially, yeah, I grew it from three to 5,000 PAs.
I'm trying to remember how we first met. I remember you being in all the press. So when Miss Jones launched, did the Times cover it in the Daily Mail? There was a
Yeah,
couple of
Daily Mail, yeah, Daily
like
Mail.
it was a big thing in the sort of PA world. But I think I'm pretty certain that Susie Baron Stubley introduced
Yes,
us.
she did. She
Yeah.
did. Yeah,
And
you're absolutely right.
it was quite early on in the Miss Jones journey.
Yeah, it was within the
Um,
first, I think, 7 or 8 months we'd been going,
mm,
like literally. And I remember I'd met Susie, and I can't remember how I met Susie now. It's really bad, isn't it? But Susie was brilliant because she really did, she was really behind it. And
mm,
somebody like at the level that Susie was, it was just like to have her behind it for me, it was like, wow, she
yeah.
was like, I'm going to recommend you and I'm going to get the PAs to sign up. And she was just phenomenal. Absolutely. Oh, I still miss her.
Oh.
She was just phenomenal. Sorry.
No, it's fine. Honestly, it's coming up for 9 years soon. I always get emotional at this time of year because it is, I still can't believe sometimes it has happened. And
Mm.
quite honestly, having to phone you at that time when you're over the other side of the world and having to tell you what had
Oh,
happened,
that was horrendous. I don't think I'll ever,
it
as
was
I said, I'll never forget where I was standing when I got your phone call. And then
it
I'm,
was one of the worst phone calls I had to make.
yeah, that
And
was
it,
that was tough. That was really tough.
yeah,
But to be serious, I mean, honestly, I owe Susie a lot because, and you a lot, and Donna, and Linda Watkin, and people who were all Emma Staines, everyone
yeah,
who was really took to Miss Jones and grew it to being a community of which I've still got amazing friendships from.
mm,
I think that's the biggest thing for me. And I think Susie was phenomenal on that. And I remember you and I meeting. I'm sure we met at a dinner. No, that was Sue. That was Sue Post. Remember we did Sue
super,
Post?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But I think it was that thing. It was more about connecting PAs together as well,
Mm,
and them getting the rewards. But I think when we got people like Fortnum and Mason on, and then we got, after that was the Dorchester, and then it was the Lanesborough, and then it just kind of snowballed. And like you say, with the press was brilliant.
mm.
Um, I've still got the press cuttings, and still my mum still has them pinned on the board.
Well, that was a big thing. I mean, when you look at how assistants are portrayed in the press now, I mean, it's all salacious stories. They're not
Yeah,
reporting on
no.
anything that we do or achieve. It's, Matthew Perry's PA has been arrested. It's all that stuff. But back then, for somebody to launch a business and to get that, and it
Mm.
to be a business for personal executive assistants, and for that to reach the national newspapers was massive back then.
Yeah, it was.
You
I
know,
was very proud of it. I think the funniest phone call I had was out of that Daily Mail piece was Marcus Waring's wife, the chef's wife, Jane Waring, called me. And I wouldn't believe that it was Jane Waring initially. I think you know me, Vic. I'm not somebody, I like to be in the background. I don't like
yeah.
to be at the forefront of everything. And I literally was like, Jane Waring, okay. And then when she started talking more and more about the restaurants that they wanted to put them on to Miss Jones and they wanted to host a dinner for us and everything else, I was like, okay, this is actually Marcus Waring's wife. I was like, oh yeah, okay, that would be amazing. And Jane and I are still, friends to this day, which is
Mm.
just so lovely. But it's kind of, I look back and it really was the first of its kind. There
It
were
was,
other PA groups, but not to that extent and to that
no.
level.
I mean, if you look at what's out there now, I mean, there's a lot in the PA market in the UK, and it's kind of ironic in a way because the profession is a heck of a lot smaller than it was
Yeah,
when you were running Miss Jones.
yeah,
Like there's
yeah.
a lot less BAs and PAs and AAs as they call them. And it's really, the industry is very different now as well. So would I go out to a supplier showcase to meet suppliers? Well, you can do a lot of it online, but back then, yeah, we could reach out to people, but a lot of business in London, especially, was done face to face, and
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
just how it was. If you wanted to get in with people, I mean, I remember obviously the connection to Anya Hindmarsh, and then
Mhm.
we did the big PA conference at the Jumeirah
Yes,
in
that's right.
Knightsbridge. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Um, there was all sorts of stuff, and then I did sort of board dinners and strategy days at all sorts of restaurants in London you put us in touch with. But I think a lot of assistants now would find it hard to get. I know you didn't run them in this way, but the way they run now is, you tend to be out for half a day or an exhibition for the day, sort of traipsing around. I think it's quite hard to quantify that to bosses now
Yeah,
because
yeah.
it's something you
Very different
can.
time then, I think,
Yeah, it was. Yeah, social media wasn't as big back then. And
God,
I
no.
remember the PA events that I was running, like we were still mocking up flyers online and handing them out around offices. Like, give these to your PAs to come. Like, people have got no idea what I had to do for PA networking. But yeah, I was there with my handbag and homemade flyers.
Yeah, it
Um,
was, but that was how we did things. I think
yeah.
that's the other thing. And I think it's something that I always wanted PAs to be promoted and understood and
Mm,
bosses to actually realize, hold on a minute, I've got an absolute gem of a PA and I don't want to lose her.
mm.
And I think that was the whole thing. I mean, you remember we did a couple of fan trips as well, which were great. We did them to like the Cavalieri Hotel in Rome, and Alitalia sponsored that, which was insane. I mean, I look back now and I'm like, that is insane. Like they you know, and we went twice actually to the Waldorf Cavalieri in Rome. It was insane, you
Well, if
know.
you think now, another difference now, like so many assistants have to use up their annual leave just to come to a training day or for a
Yes,
training course or a conference. I mean,
isn't
it's
that?
ludicrous, but back then they were like, yeah, go.
Go for it.
I do remember a fan trip you did where it was with the same people owned the Barclay,
Oh
Claridge's,
yes, it
and
was
the
the Connaught.
Connaught.
Yeah. Oh, that was
And
amazing.
then we had to try something in each hotel, and I had a suite at the Connaught. And I was just thinking, I've never stayed anywhere like this before. I was really quite overwhelmed.
Didn't
But
you have a butler? Didn't you and Emma have a butler?
yeah, I mean, on a Premier Inn, travel lodges there. Here I am and I was in reception of the hotel, and I was stood next to Tilda Swinton, and one of her movies had come out then, and I was just gawping at her like some. I was just like, oh my God. It was, yeah, it was really, really good times, and the industry is very different now. So obviously you transitioned out the PA role, became a business owner.
Yeah.
And then just over 10 years ago, you transitioned out of being a business owner.
I did. I did. And it was hard. It wasn't easy. You know the full story behind it. And
Mm,
for obvious reasons, I can't go into that full story. But yes, it was very hard. And I was actually very ill.
mm,
And I was very ill for about 2 years. And I had a problem with my digestion. And I couldn't eat properly. So it was, I couldn't go to event, I couldn't do anything really. But they got to the bottom of it. But that was actually caused by stress, more than anything. So I kind of slowly went back into being a PA actually in some ways. I did a lot of temp work. I temped for a great company in just off Berkeley Square, which was brilliant. And I slowly, that was like 10 years, yeah, it was 10 years ago. I slowly kind of put myself back into the working world. And I think you have something that when you, again, almost like when I felt bad about not, doing that role that I'd kind of left because of a difficult boss, I kind of felt I'd failed with Miss Jones in a way. I felt like I'd let a lot of really good friends and people down. And I knew that wasn't the case, but
mm,
I hid like a lot of people, like we couldn't find you for about a year and a half. You just literally went off the radar.
yeah.
Um, and I did. And I think it was that thing of being, you felt like you'd let people down, and that you hadn't succeeded, which was quite difficult. So
Mm.
I think, yeah, it was starting again, actually. It was my 40th birthday. I had to start all over again, you know.
Well, do you know, I think with Miss Jones, when that happened to you, and obviously I won't go into the details, but Miss Jones was at its absolute peak. Like you had so many plans, and all I will say was so angry afterwards, and obviously worried about you because you became a really close friend as well,
Yeah,
and you were
yeah.
my priority. So I sort of stepped away as a member of it. I know it's still going today.
Yeah, and
Um,
good luck to them. As I'll always, me, Vic, I never bear grudges. It's not who I
mm,
am.
yeah,
As far as I'm concerned, I'll always be the founder of something that was great,
yeah,
and gave me the amazing connections that I have. I mean, without Miss Jones, I wouldn't be sitting here doing the call, you know.
no,
So I have a great friendship with yourself, with others, and it also stood me in a lot of good stead for kind of what I went on to do, really.
yeah, and I mean, well, I've only ever got really good memories from that, but I think you learn a lot of lessons every time you transition through another part of your life. And one of the things that is changing in the world of EAs and PAs is that this is not a career for life anymore.
Yeah,
And initially, when I started saying this during the back of the lockdowns, I was trying to be careful because I knew people would jump on me.
yeah,
And I was saying, but no, these younger generations, they don't want to be an assistant for 40 years. They don't want to work in any profession for 40 years. Like they'll go through different, I think
agree.
the research is suggesting up to about 4 different professions.
Mm,
Because you kind of I think especially for a lot of office type professions, you kind of start to hit a bit of a lid.
Yeah.
You know, my friend's the same. He's an IT manager. He's completely hit a lid with it now. He's taken
Yeah.
it as far as he wants to go, and now he's totally looking to do something different with animals.
Right, I understand
Um,
that.
and so what that's a, you know, we used to get up on these conference stages and say to people, you know, this is how you shape your career. And now I'm saying to people, I understand you're probably only going to be in this career for 5 to 10 years max, and we'll support you for the time you're here before you sort of move on.
Yeah.
But actually, I mean, this isn't really a new trend because you have done it. Susie transitioned out of her EA role to
You
set
can
up
do
a
it.
training company. So
Yeah.
this has been going on for a while, actually.
It has been going on for a while, and I think what PAs and EAs and admin and everything else need to remember is that they're getting a really good training actually to transition out of it.
Mm,
Eventually, it's like you're not coming out of something, with no skills. I mean, you've
mm,
got to look at it that you are an excellent communicator. You can juggle all different plates at any time. You
mm,
can network because you're used to talking to so many different people that you're used to. My biggest thing is about networking people together to get something done. And that's exactly what we do as a PA. We're
mm.
we're putting the boss's diary together and we're looking, going, well, that person needs to be in that meeting, and so and so from accounts needs to be in that meeting. So you're actually automatically doing that anyway without realizing it.
Yeah,
And we are the gate, we are the gate. I mean, I still talk as if I am a PA, but we are the gatekeepers. We are the very much. And I always used to find that if I didn't get on with somebody's PA, it was usually because their boss was really difficult.
mm,
And so I would be like, I'd say to my boss, I think you might have a tricky one on that one. He is a bit of a tyrant. So good
yeah,
on that. If I can't get through it, then there's a reason. But I think, it really does set you up. And it was something that Susie and I used to talk a lot about actually, was that how you transition out of it. Because in my heart, I'm still a PA. I've always said that, no matter what I was doing and finishing doing last year and projects that I've run. If I had not been a PA, I couldn't have gone on to do what I'm doing now. I just
yeah,
couldn't. Like, it's a real defined skill set about being a PA, EA, admin. You should always be so proud of what you do because it's
mm,
a really hard job. I don't care what anyone says. You are juggling so much, and you're
yeah,
juggling other people's demands as well as your boss's demands. I used to almost have a traffic light system for Steve, which was red, do not go in. Amber was almost like, think about it. Is it really that important that you need to go in? And green was like, go for your life. But you have to manage it. So you're managing their time, your time, other people's time. And it's the same when you come out of that role and you're either running your business or going into something totally different.
yeah,
I mean, for me, it was going after Miss Jones, and I went into PR, worked with some great people doing that, then was a bit bored with that, and then ended up, literally falling into working with people experiencing homelessness, which, as you know, Vic, I'm absolutely passionate about, and I will
yeah,
always shout at the top of my voice as loudly as I can. But the skills I had from being a PA was being able to talk to anyone. Doesn't
yeah,
matter. Could be the Queen, could be the dustman, could be whatever.
yeah,
You can talk to anybody. And I think that's something that, PAs, EAs should never ever forget.
mm,
It's really important. And you and I have talked about that, the AI side of everything, and how many people now are fess up. I use ChatGPT on some stuff, because it's like it can rephrase it in ways that I'm like, oh, actually, yeah, that's pretty good. But I think these days PAs and EAs need to sit back and think, hold on a minute. When I'd hit my glass ceiling all those years
mm,
ago at Metro. I wasn't going to go any higher than that. And I didn't particularly want to either. I had a great boss, and there was no one that would actually technically fill his shoes. But then I remember the PAs that were lifelong career PAs,
mm,
the PA to the, CEO of Coca-Cola in the UK. She was amazing. I still
mm,
remember her to this day. And she was the one that gave me the great advice. Hilda,
mm,
she'd been his PA for like 14 years.
mm.
And she was a career PA. So there's so many differences. And it was,
Yeah.
yeah,
I just think, I mean, clearly, I think people are going to work the profession very differently going forward. I do think AI will take over a substantial part of the role, and it's
yeah,
not just AI; it's automation, it's digital printing, it's I mean,
Yeah,
there's all sorts, there's fintech, insurtech, there's loads of technology that we just haven't touched upon in the EAPA world yet.
yeah, absolutely.
Um, but I do think this is why, I mean, I know Martin was saying that, you know, each assistant's going to be a sole producer. All your journeys all look different from each other because you're going to have to work out what you're really good at, what AI is going to, and automation will take away from you, and
Mhm.
then what is your return on investment back to a company.
Agreed.
So when I've been out training this year, every training day I've done, that hasn't been blighted by rail strikes, I've asked every group what, so I say I'm a HR director coming in and we're looking at restructuring, what is your ROI? Like, other
Yeah,
than saying you save time, which is great, but it's not a winning strapline anymore.
no,
It should be, because time's a precious commodity, but it's not enough. So
yeah,
what is your ROI? And I've literally just had blank faces all around the UK this year. And so that's quite worrying, because I said to him, if you can't instantly tell me why you're here at this company, you're already on the next restructure list.
yeah, 100%.
And so this is what I need to, I can't conquer everything in the UK. But certainly with EPA members, I can really help them with that, and some of the trainers we're working with, because we will go through a lot more recessions in the future. So you've got, you know, because we're such a global economy, and that makes us more fragile, because if America topples, we do. And so you
Listen,
have to
I
be,
agree.
you have
Yeah.
to be on a back foot all the time now, which is, I think it's a good thing for like resilience
Mm.
and things like that. Do you know what? This is where I really miss Susie, because I'd love to know what she would be saying now, because she talked about the evolution of the EA role 15 years ago. That's when she was the first speaker in the industry here to start talking
Right.
about it. And she made all these predictions. I've still got the slides,
Mm.
and they've all come true.
Yeah.
And she didn't even know about the sort of breadth and depth of the technology that was going to be out at this point.
Mm.
So yeah, it's really got not to know. Well, I'm the one doing her job now, making the
Yeah,
predictions. Yeah.
exactly. But I think it was that thing. I think Susie was very she was very forward thinking.
Mm,
And I think, sitting with a gin and tonic at the end of, any session we'd had with Susie was amazing. I always remember when we did something at Dirty Martini in
yes.
always remember sitting with Susie and Dirty Martini. And I think it's that thing of like, I think you're almost sometimes a little bit too scared as a PA or EA to voice what you think,
Yeah.
because you can be seen, and please shoot me if I'm wrong on this, but I think sometimes you can be seen as just the person that's organizing the diary. And there is still that attitude in the corporate world at times when somebody's like, "Oh, it's just the PA," and I'm like, "I'm sorry, no, what do you mean? It's just the PA? No, it's not. That is the person that is. So if PA's down tools today and walked out,
Mm.
there would be trouble."
That kind of needs to happen now, because when I think back to when we were all in the profession at the time, when you were still a PA at
Yeah,
Metro, the roles were a lot more well respected than they are now, and
yeah,
that's
100%.
really really sad. Like, I've actually been quite horrified by what I've been hearing and seeing this year, and like EA's having to leave the profession entirely ahead of when they wanted to, because they can't get a job as a EA, even though they've got 20 years experience on their CV. They've got kept up the qualifications, kept up to date with training courses, CPD, and now suddenly they've just been sort of cast aside. And that's been quite frightening. And it's not just happening to EAs and PAs. I saw a post not long ago on LinkedIn. I can only do LinkedIn in small doses these days. There's too much self-congratulation on there, and I'm humbled and I'm thrilled and I'm excited.
Yeah.
I'm so and yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm afraid, as an ex-homeless person, I really do take offence to people snapping themselves with homeless people outside Starbucks.
Yeah, let's not. Yeah.
Yeah, I get really quite cross at that. So yeah, but this guy was because the tech sector, especially in America, have made loads of redundancies this year. And this guy said, I've applied for over 800 jobs. He's been out of work since January. It just came up in my algorithm. I read his posts, like he's got qualifications coming out of his ears. Like, in prior to COVID, he would have been snapped up, and he's like, I don't know what to do. They keep telling me I need 10 versions of my CV. I've kept up to date with
Oh,
my L&D. I've got experience. I've got I've brought millions into the last firm. Like, what is it that employers are expecting now when you go to the job market? And that's something we're going to have to work on quite urgently in the EAPA world.
100% Vic,
Yeah,
100%. I think it's
because
changed
it's
a lot.
the perception's gone completely awry from, when we were all working way
Yeah,
back when. Yeah, I'm not saying we didn't have some, sort of bosses that were quite degrading of secretaries and PAs, but
yeah. But
this
majority of it, I mean, we were treated exceptionally well. I mean, I look back and I think, at the time I had Steve, I got given a bonus, which didn't happen actually at all. And I thought, and we also, the group of us that were together at Metro, we got together and we did a quarterly objectives thing that we would get based a bonus on and everything else. And Steve was very up for it. He was like, yeah, 100%. But I got what the exec team got, which, really in those days, you didn't get
just
that.
didn't happen. No, I know.
It didn't happen. So that's why I really, obviously loved my job at Metro. But I loved it because it also taught me a lot, which I then took on into Miss Jones and into all the other roles I've done since. That was the key thing.
I've been doing a lot of reflection this year, and then trying to work out where the industry is going forward. And I actually do know a lot of the stats and facts now, the demographics,
Mm,
and the problems we're going to have trying to get young people to do these
yeah,
roles.
yeah.
And it is about the positioning and perception. But then I look back, and some of the biggest moments I had in my career, and sorry for anyone who's not used to my French bulldog Rossi pigging around in the background. I
Oh, sorry,
can't get
probably
rid
need
of
Ben
him.
charging in shortly from his dog walk.
He's literally snorting, and yeah, and I had some of the biggest years of my career, the biggest earning points during the global financial recession.
Mm,
And the EAs would come up to me and say, "But how are you doing that?" I said, I'm trying to be different in such a competitive market."
yeah,
And one of the things I realised very sadly that an EA service on its own, as much as it was all encompassing and I worked at a very high level, I had to specialise in an area of business so that I
yeah,
had that string to my bow
yeah,
and that I could really articulate, look, you're getting this executive support service and I'm really good in HR and I can do succession planning and recruitment and aggregate
yeah,
data and I've
absolutely.
been kind of trying to drill that down because I got bonuses during the recession. I've still got pay rises. I still fought for it
Yeah,
every year because
yeah.
as far as I was concerned, I was doing a good job.
Well, yeah, but you were bringing something else to the table, and I think
Yeah.
that's the thing, and this is why I don't ever really want PAs to be fearful that they can't do something,
Yeah,
uh,
definitely.
because you can,
Yeah.
read about it, invest in some training in an area that you really want to look at and change.
Mm,
And I think the other thing for me is like, don't forget your voice. You've got a
yeah.
voice, use it. Took me a long time to find mine.
Mm,
But I think it's something that, and especially for me going into the world of, working with people experiencing homelessness in the charity industry, which is very, very, you poles apart. You're like corporate and then you've got charity. It's
mm,
like totally different.
I know.
Yeah, yeah, mind-blowingly different. And it's kind of, with doing that, it's interesting because in a way, with doing the CEO sleep out that I'm doing as well, and I'm obviously working when I work with Change Please, Coffee and Driving for Change last year, I'm still in connection and still bringing in the PA side of me by doing partnerships, so still talking to people about
Mm,
engaging with Driving for Change and Change Please still, and then CEO Sleep Out, as it
mm,
says, is for, it can be for CEOs, directors, heads of, and the reason we call it, a lot of people have been quite like, well, CEOs, and I'm not a CEO. Why would I want to come and sleep out and raise funds if I'm not a CEO? Because I'm like, it doesn't matter. We call it that because, if you look at the corporate world, CEOs, C-suite, etc., have a big influence and obviously raise a lot of money. But it's kind of like, to me, if you're a PA and you want to come and sleep out, do it.
mm,
You're going to meet so many different people at that event. It's a great networking opportunity. And that's kind of where my PA skills come back in again. Initially when I started with them 4 years ago and I was doing like part-time work with them, I was going to do the admin role.
yeah.
And I never forget Bianca, who's the CEO. She was just like, she very much went, "You're not going to do the admin role, Hen." She said, "Sorry, you're doing the partnership role." And I'm like, "No, I'm much happier doing the admin role." I'm like, "I haven't got my confidence quite back yet." She was like, "No, you're going to do." She said, "I really want you to do the partnership role." And working for another woman, I've had history in the past where it hasn't worked.
Mm,
It's been quite difficult. B is fantastic and does promote you and push you and do everything. And I remember last year at the Lords, at the CEO sleep at Lords, she, kind of said over the last 3 years, Hannah's increased the funding, that's come in because of the people that she's brought into it. And I suppose that's when you stand there, and I actually stood there, and I'm probably getting a bit teary about it now. I stood there and I realized that everything I had done, from being a PA to being Miss Jones to working in PR to like working with people, and then finally ending up in somewhere that I want to be. I really want to make a difference and to help people get through a certain situation. I mean, but it.
Yeah.
And it's something that is nothing to be ashamed of. And that's the biggest thing that I try and get across to, when I was working on the front line, is please don't be ashamed of it. It's not your fault. Things happen that we can't. I mean, if it hadn't been for my family, losing everything like I did, I would have been in the same situation.
It's even
that simple.
scarier now. When I was homeless on a park bench as a young secretary, so when people say, well, work harder and it'll be fine, actually, it wasn't. I had 3 jobs back then. I was a young secretary, I was
Yeah,
working in a bar, and I was a cleaner. And
yeah,
that still wasn't enough. I still ended up
yeah,
on a park bench, so I couldn't have worked any harder.
yeah,
I think there was no help. The council basically said you're not a priority, even though I came from a very vulnerable, difficult
yeah,
upbringing. As you knew, my
yeah,
social service files were like a mile long,
yeah.
and they just shooed me away. And I was completely on my own and having to work my way out of it. And I didn't really know about the charities then.
Yeah.
The
A lot of
church,
people don't. A lot of people don't.
no,
Even now, they don't. And
no.
there is an element of self-worth, pride, and everything else
Mm.
that comes into it as well. And
Especially with a lot of Brits, because you do feel embarrassed. I felt
yeah,
at 17, I was really embarrassed because well, I was about, no, I was 18 at that point.
mm,
And I'd moved out of home at 16. So I was self-sufficient. I had all these jobs and
yeah,
paying rent and bills. And I think the scary thing now, it's much easier even now to become homeless now, which is what's happening to hundreds of thousands of
oh, it's
Brits, it would seem.
terrifying. Yeah,
The difference you've got now is that there is very little help, even less than there was back when I just didn't know about a lot of it. But there's,
yeah,
in terms of public sector services, people still expect. I mean, I was chatting to some friends the other day. They said, well, we just turn up at the council and they have to home us. Well, most UK councils are actually bankrupt.
yeah,
They
yeah.
don't, the social housing ran out years ago.
So, yeah.
At best, you'll get put into a hostel. And actually, down here, somebody who was helping us out with the admin earlier this year, she became homeless. She ended up living in a shed with her 2 sons. And this went on for months. And they eventually, and she was still trying to help EPRAT. And I said, look, don't worry. I know I'm going to get behind, but honestly, EPA is the last priority right
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
And they eventually moved a group of homeless Brits into a holiday caravan park on the border of Somerset because there was nowhere else to put them.
But this is
Um,
this is the huge problem, and it's something that I really have to stand down and not get on my bandwagon about. But
no.
it's something that, alone just in London, there's over 11,500 people sleeping rough every night. Now that isn't even an accurate, I mean, I'm going back on the count. I go out, I'll hopefully be going out to Housing Justice with the count in November because I still very much want to be a part of that industry.
Mm,
And the work that people do is just insane. And I'm not surprised there's high levels of burnout because the emotion when you're working with people on the street is huge.
yeah, it is.
You
It's
come home at night, you shut the door and you never switch it off. Like you just
and I think
don't.
every homeless person has a story, and I think that's the
Mm,
thing I learned. I also learned, perhaps I was a little bit naive, but how judgmental my fellow countrymen and women were about homeless
very much.
people. They
Yeah.
just assumed I was jacking up on heroin every night and I was in
Yeah.
prostitution and
And an alcohol.
and actually I was a young secretary dressed. I'd go into the local public toilets, make sure I'd have a quick wash, and I'd go in. No one at work knew initially.
No,
I
no.
covered it up completely, but I'd get really sad when people still have that. Well, it's your own fault. Your bad life decisions have
Yeah, and
ended
they
you up
still do
here. And
though. They still
yeah,
do.
yeah,
People that we met when I was with Change Peas and we were doing Driving for Change. Some of the people that we met were just, it was heartbreaking.
mm,
Like, still had his gym membership, so could go in and use his gym and have a shower, and
Yeah.
he was working,
Yeah.
but he couldn't do certain things. And I just thought, this is like, no, we're in 2020, at that time, 22, 23. How is this possible? And it just, so at least, in some ways, the doing CEO sleep out, I still kind of have my hand in.
Mm.
It's kind of like, when I look at the work we've done with kind of 200 small charities, we've raised over 4 million in the last 10 years. We've raised the attendees attendance on, CEO sleep out. And do you know what the biggest thing is actually watching these chief execs or high level business people, or whatever, going home the next morning, they can barely speak to you, right? They are just exhausted. And I think it suddenly gives them recognition. Yes, okay, everyone will say, yeah, but they've spent the night in a stadium. They've had somewhere warm to go if they've needed it. They've
Mm.
had tea and coffee. Yes, okay, but they're still getting some experience. Like when it's raining, some of these places are not very sheltered. Yes, it might be in a stadium, but they're not necessarily very sheltered. They're
Yeah.
still getting soaking wet. I mean, with all the ones that we do, we all sleep out at,
Mm.
whoever's running the event, we stay and we sleep out. We're not sort of sitting here going, oh, we do this, but then we go off and stay at a travel lodge. No, we don't. We had 120 people sleeping out at Lord's last year. It's that thing of how, when you film people the night before, everyone's quite buoyant and in almost like a little bit excited that they're at this big sleepover.
Yeah.
Then you start seeing the videos coming out on Instagram at 2, 3, 4, 5 in the morning because the traffic's going past, they're cold, their sleeping bags got damp. And then you can see really ticking over in people's heads the next day where they're like, okay, yeah, we need to, as a social responsibility or as a something, within our company, we need to do something. And actually, I will say that the majority of people that have done the sleep outs have gone on to do stuff, which
Yeah.
I'm thrilled about, and that's how it should be.
Well, I think it's something that's quite universal, regardless of your background. Anybody can end up there. I mean,
Yeah,
you could be uber wealthy and lose everything,
yeah,
and you could your marriage or partnership could suddenly change, and that's it. You're out on your backside. I mean,
yeah,
all different reasons of the people I met um over the years. I mean, it was just, yeah, it was breathtaking,
yeah.
and the journeys we'd all had. I mean, I remember sitting on a park bench with my belongings, and just it was in the middle of the night. I didn't really sleep much, to be honest, because it's
You
obviously been
wouldn't.
vulnerable. I was, I
Yeah.
was
And you
petrified
were
I'd
a
get
woman,
attacked.
Vic, you
Yeah, so I
know.
didn't. I remember sitting there crying, thinking it doesn't get like life doesn't get any much worse than this.
Mm.
Like I'm at rock bottom. The only thing I had was my career,
Yeah,
and I'm thinking, right, the only way up the only way is up from here. It has to be, because
yeah,
if it isn't, then I don't know why I'm here. And
yeah,
it was a
yeah.
really hard journey. I think when the lockdowns kicked off and me and my husband to be confronted with that possibility again, I was completely horrified,
No, I can
because
imagine.
I was just like, oh my God, like, because a lot of people, workers, they got the furlough, we got nothing as a small business.
No, I got nothing either for being in a charity at the time.
No,
And
and
I
it,
literally had nothing. I had to sign on for the first time, like in donkey's years. And I've never, signed on.
yeah.
So to do that for me was just like, that just doesn't happen,
But it made me, I mean, I remember saying to my husband, look, this is how vulnerable, we were both working hard,
Yeah.
just keeping above water, which is fine. That's success to me.
You're
And
literally treading the whole
yeah,
time.
and then to be confronted with that, and to have the chancellor get up saying to was it 2.58 million small businesses, sorry, we can't help you, there's not enough money in the kitty. I mean, yeah, I told the members I went to work at Sainsbury's, I
Yes,
paid
I remember.
I
Yeah.
paid EPA, I funded all those memberships, and I paid the trainers out of my
Yeah.
supermarket wage. And it was really quite ironic. I was thinking, like, most of the members were earning more than me, even on furlough.
Yes.
But I tried to do my bit. But I actually really enjoyed Sainsbury's.
Yeah.
It was
Good
really
people.
hard work, but I met lots of different people. And one
Yeah.
of my close friends from Sainsbury's had just passed away suddenly a couple of weeks ago, and it kind of it hit another season. She was absolutely awesome. But she was somebody that had to work 7 days a week. So she'd come off shift, and then she was in social care, so she'd be a carer. And she worked really hard to support her family. And I'm pretty certain that literally all that work contributed
I
to
wouldn't
her
be
untimely
surprised.
path.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, you know, you burn out, you do burn
Yeah,
out. And I think it's higher cases of burnout now than it probably
yeah,
was when I was, you know, after I kind of left Miss Jones. Um, I think now you have to be, I mean, that's one of the reasons I left London, you know,
mm,
I was exhausted, I was so tired and I
mm.
was so done in. And, you know, moving, like both you and I have moved away from London, and I'm like, oh, this is what life is like, you know?
There's life outside of the city. I mean, listen, I was born in London. I've spent most of my life.
Yeah,
I love London, but for me, it then suddenly started just getting too hard. And I'm
yeah,
like, I'm having to work even more and more and more hours to survive
yeah,
here.
yeah.
And then I'm spending what little time I have off just sleeping, just to get enough energy to get through the next week. And I
Crazy.
think with the train fares going up, all the rent and mortgages going up, and it was around the time I left, it just didn't balance out anymore. I thought, well, I'm paying a premium. I mean, London's back to being a playground for the rich again now, which is really
But
sad.
Rich, you've got to be earning to have a decent life in London now. You've got to be earning 75 grand.
I know, and that's
And I'm
not
like,
most EA
hold on.
salaries.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, I don't know now what PA salaries now, 50, 60, if that, if you're in the
This-
corporate sector.
yeah, the 60 bracket is in the smaller percentage. There are still plenty of EAs earning between 60 and 100, but
Yeah,
that's a
yeah,
small percentage.
yeah.
The common salary, I mean, the salaries have been going down in London.
Yes. And that's the
But
thing, it's like your rent. I mean, for me, my rent went up. I mean, I was very lucky for 4 years. They didn't increase my rent. They were phenomenal. I had
mm,
amazing landlords. And even when we went into lockdown, they gave me back my deposit and they said to me, don't worry for 3 months because we've got a 3-month thing on our mortgage, so don't pay.
that's
Which,
what our landlady ended up doing for us. She saved us. She
yeah,
saved
and
us.
they absolutely saved me,
Yeah.
because I had no income, and I had, you know, the universal credit. I had to sign up to that to get them to pay my rent because I was
Mm,
like, otherwise I can't. I was working for a charity during that whole time, but we didn't get furlough because I wasn't PAYE, and it was just like, oh my God, I'm back to where I was like all those years ago, and I remember not sleeping at night and thinking, I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, I just genuinely don't know what I'm going to do. And then, and which, you know, I kind of look back and I laughed a bit because I was like, I'm working with people who are actually homeless, you know,
mm,
and I could be in that bracket myself very soon.
yeah.
So it's, yeah, it's not
Well,
easy.
we'll definitely share the information about the big
Yeah,
sleeping off
do.
with
Yeah.
everyone and see if we can get some people involved. Um,
Brilliant.
yeah, I definitely should do, especially when I've had personal experience of it. But it's been so nice catching up with you today, Hen.
And you.
Long overdue.
I know, I know.
But yeah, it's
So
been
many happy memories. So thank you.
yes, yeah,
It's
no,
actually
definitely,
brought, for me, it's brought a lot back. And I'm
yeah,
actually coming off this call really. Oh yeah, I miss Suze. I don't, you know, and I think it's just brought back a lot of very happy memories. So
yeah.
thank you for that, Vic.
No,
It means a
the
lot.
the biggest pleasure. I mean, with the fire says I try and talk to lots of different people because we've all had sort of different experiences,
Mm,
and it's not a one size fits all career journey. You know, when you're an assistant, it
yeah,
really isn't. It can go anywhere. That I think that's the beauty of being in the profession. You just actually don't know where it's going to go, and
yeah,
I
exactly.
didn't expect to be setting up EPA. That wasn't on the bingo list, card
No,
list that year. um,
I agree.
you know
I
what? Yeah,
agree.
I was wedded in for a career for life because that was what was sold to me. But obviously things are changing now, and change is a good thing. And I'll be interested to, because I'll be part of this transition period of
Mm,
people retiring out and then they're trying to get the
yeah,
youngsters engaged with it.
yeah,
It's funny because I was talking to a PA 2 days ago, and she said her 16-year-old daughter, when she said, "Would you like to be in a sit?" And she was like, "Oh no, God no, it sounds like slave labor." And my niece said that as well. So, young people are very honest. There's no filter.
yeah. No, there
So
isn't. There
there's
isn't.
a real that it gives us something to work with, but it will be
Mm.
interesting to see what it actually becomes in 10 years because I think it's going to be some
Oh
big
yeah, you
change
and I
again.
are 100% on that. It's not going to be anywhere near what it is now.
No,
Like that,
no,
that those days are going to go.
yeah,
And I think, as we've said, and happy to always come back and do another chat about career change. But I think it's you do need to train. You do need to be able to have other bows You know,
Yeah,
sort of, you need to have other skills under your belt,
yeah,
definitely,
definitely.
definitely.
Well, thank you very much, and I
Pleasure.
hope the people watching back the recording enjoy. And they can always reach you, or anyone can reach you on LinkedIn or
Yeah,
Facebook. Yeah,
100%. Always, you know, absolutely. Always happy to answer questions. Always free to come and do talks. Always around. So yeah, more than happy for anything. Not a problem.
fabulous. Well,
And thanks
enjoy the
everyone
rest
for
of your day.
listening today. Yeah.
And yeah, I'm going to come and see you soon. Now that we're both on the
Bring
south.
Rossi. So
Yes.
Rossi and Fun, who's just coming back now. So you're going to hear the coming in. But no, Vic, thanks so much. And you know, just great to talk about very good times. So thank
Yeah,
you.
absolutely. Well, take care. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.